I think that an entire documentary could be devoted to the subject of hydraulic fracturing adjusted for ecological warfare. So in the future, I may create a more detailed video on this topic. The purpose of this summary is to outline some basic conclusions. Here are some attributes of fracking that I've noticed. Water depletion, habitat destruction, community division, vulnerable zones, scenery degradation, ticks and terrs, lowered property value, disease, air pollution, land and water contamination, pollution cover-up, non-lethal weapons and tactics. Water depletion. Fracking requires a significant amount of fresh water that depletes the water supply available to humans and animals. It also contaminates groundwater, wells, rivers, and streams with toxic chemicals. I surmise this is a dual strategy for resource denial that will also be explained in the mining chapter. Basically, I see this as a gambit to cut off water supplies. Habitat destruction. Fracking ruins ecosystems and kills wildlife. Animals lose their homes and die because of construction and pollution. The noise and light pollution alone will cause birds to leave the area. Community division. Like mining, fracking has been known to foster community separation. I suspect this is a purposeful divide and conquer strategy that was mentioned in the state-hosted Clandestine Ecological Warfare chapter. Vulnerable zones. Fracking is done near sensitive natural resources, including streams, rivers, and agricultural land. Fracking projects have also sprung up around elderly homes, hospitals, daycare centers, and schools. I think most of us would rather not consider the possibility that, in addition to the standard corruption, there's a grim reason for the area selection of some fracking projects, especially if it led to a covert depopulation agenda. It would also be disturbing to consider the idea that people are carefully planning the soft murder of children and the elderly. This is a horrible notion that most of us would rather not ponder. However, if it is happening, regardless of how painful it may be to think about, and despite how far the complicity extends, it must be exposed in order to be stopped. Scenery degradation. Fracking infrastructure ruins the scenery. These production facilities contain flare stacks, drilling rigs, storage tanks, waste containers, generators, compressor stations, and lots of vehicular traffic. The pleasant views that landowners had are gone once the infrastructure is in place. The landscape is permanently degraded, with components that remain after the project is finished. No one wants to be surrounded by drilling rigs. This repulsive scene may cause some residents to evacuate. So, as I described in the site pollution segment of the stealth weapons chapter, I suspect this landscape defilement is an integral part of the displacement strategy. Ticks and terrs. This pertains to the modern ecological warfare chapter that we explored, where it was described that hazardous industrial chemicals and radiologicals can be used as improvised CBRNE agents and weapons of mass destruction. Fracking contaminates the air, soil, and water with the following chemicals: benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylenes, nitrogen oxides, methane, ethane, propane, carbon disulfide, hydrogen sulfide, formaldehyde, black carbon, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. In addition to these chemicals in the petroleum, there's the fracking fluid. To some extent, the industry has been able to hide the contents of this fluid from the public by labeling it confidential business information. Although it's been reported that cancer-inducing benzene is one fracking fluid ingredient, it was confirmed in July of 2021 that with the permission of the EPA, oil companies in multiple U.S. states have been using PFAS chemicals in their fracking fluid for a decade. These chemicals are confirmed to induce cancer and birth defects. At some locations, there's also a potential exposure to radiation. If the brine is radioactive, then there's an additional danger of environmental contamination when it's hauled off to treatment plants. A deliberate dumping of radioactive material could be arranged under the guise of an accident. Lowered property value. People do not want to live in a stinking, noisy, hazardous place that is tarnished with oil and gas equipment. Disease. It has been reported that people living near fracking infrastructure exhibit an increase in health problems. Children and the elderly are especially vulnerable to the toxic industrial chemicals released from these projects. Fracking has been linked to the following medical conditions: sinus and respiratory problems, skin disorders, dizziness, eye irritation, nausea, rashes, coughing, headaches, nosebleeds, low birth weight, premature birth, birth defects, childhood cancers, and death. So there's your Clandestine soft kill. Air pollution. There's two types of air pollution that I've noticed. First, the terrible smell emitted by flaring and venting that sometimes resembles rotten eggs or a combination of harsh chemicals. These bad smells could easily serve as malodorants that we learned about in Chapter 10. The malodorants, as we know, are confirmed to adequately clear areas, especially when combined with other non-lethal weapons. Fracking operations emit poisonous fumes that travel to nearby communities, causing a plethora of medical problems to those residents. You may recall from the modern ecological warfare chapter that burning petroleum has been used as a warfare tactic. Also remember that military and FEMA documents acknowledge that toxic fumes could be deliberately released from industrial plants to attack people as part of a clandestine weapons program. Some farms are surrounded by fracking wells situated a few miles away. Reportedly, some of these people can no longer sit outside because of the noxious fumes. Land and water contamination. Fracking causes the extensive pollution of both surface and groundwater, in addition to rendering agricultural land and pastures unusable. Basically, fracking aggressively contaminates food and water supplies. So whether it be through starvation or disease, soft kill depopulation appears to be the intention. Pollution cover-up. Environmental regulators are underreporting, slowly responding to complaints, ignoring pollution and health complaints, not investigating complaints, falsifying complaint records, usually not fining the industry for unauthorized emissions, and hardly ever shutting down operations that they know are causing gross pollution and sickness. Principally, regulators are protecting the toxic invaders. Non-lethal weapons and tactics. People living near fracking projects exhibit chronic anxiety, stress, and depression from air, noise, light, motion, and visual disturbances. The air and sight pollution have already been covered, so here I'll focus on the noise and bright lights. Every stage of the fracking process generates commotion. The sources of noise include drilling, fracturing, compressor stations, flaring, pipeline construction, and endless convoys of trucks. Fracking is said to dispense 24/7 racket. It's been reported that fracking crews are shouting into megaphones near homes. The noise emitted from these projects is allegedly so loud that it rattles glasses in cupboards, vibrates entire homes, and knocks pictures off of walls. You may remember from the stealth weapons chapter that noise has been used as a forceful weapon of terror since ancient times. Then there's the perpetual motion that appears to be part of the stress-inducing non-lethal weapons package. It includes a ceaseless parade of noisy trucks, night and day, around the fracking site. There are two types of bright lights: flaring, that lights up the night sky, and electric lights. Some residents located near fracking projects complain of visible flares burning throughout the night. Electric lights are also used at the fracking site so employees can work in the evening. People have reported bright lights being shined into their windows at night. In the Stealth Weapons chapter, we learned that the denial of healthy darkness will disrupt the physiological processes of most life forms and induce biological and psychological disease. In the same chapter, we discovered that bright light is a confirmed weapon and has been used as such to incapacitate people. Therefore, I figure this bright light bombardment is used in combination with other non-lethals to dislodge people from the targeted zone. So that would be part of the A2AD displacement strategy. This cluster of disturbances reportedly has an adverse effect on people and wildlife in the area. In conjunction with the chemical pollution, this relentless audio-visual onslaught is known to traumatize entire communities. I have no doubt that fracking is being used for ecological warfare. Here's a review of my observations. The targeting of civilians with toxic industrial materials serving as non-traditional CBRNE agents. Indifference and cover-up by elected officials and regulators of chemical and radiological attack and resulting environmental damage and medical and psychological injuries. A divide and conquer scheme used against the targeted community. Use of an obscure non-lethal weapons combination to inflict stress and eventual biological disease and to evoke displacement. A2AD. Industrial infrastructure converted into multifunction weapons systems, purposefully located near vulnerable settlements. Contamination of farmland and pastures, and a dual approach to cut off water supplies that conclusively translates to A2AD and soft kill by way of starvation and disease.